Hello and welcome to Para New Orleans, the Paranormal New Orleans podcast, where we tell stories of the strange, the spooky, the scary, paranormal, otherworldly, and unexplained from across the New Orleans area, Louisiana, and beyond. I am your hostess, Fat Girl Freestyle. Welcome to season 2, episode 8. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Do you believe in an afterlife? Do you believe that there's some existence beyond the one that we are in, the one that we are fully and completely aware of? Do you believe that there's something more once we reach the end of whatever stage this is? Do you? Do you sincerely believe that there is something beyond this? I ask you this question because there are many of us who get a peek behind the veil, just a glimpse, just a little touch of confirmation to say that when we get to the end of this, there is another beginning of some kind. I don't know. I don't have a complete explanation for you. I'm trying to do my best to express, but maybe I should just tell you about my experience. But I'm asking that you listen with an open mind, because at one point in my life, had you told me something like this, I would have thought that you were hallucinating, that perhaps you had some medical issue going on. I was raised by two very religious parents. Every Sunday in the church, every Wednesday Bible study, and whenever the church had anything going on, we were there. Everything was God and Jesus. Everything else outside of the church was the devil. My sister and I, we were twins. My name is Cheryl, and her name was Charlene. We were incredibly close, of course, growing up. Our parents were incredibly protective of us. And again, if it wasn't a church function, we weren't allowed to go. I won't say life was difficult for us, but we certainly didn't have those experiences of kids our age. Those kids that got to go to Disney World and take vacations. Ours was a ours was a dull, plain, uneventful childhood. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing, but in the grand scheme of life, I certainly wished we'd had more adventures, more experiences. But like I said, anything outside of church, my parents viewed as the devil. But eventually, we got old enough. We graduated high school, and we were finally able to be free. Even though we were still close, we decided to go our separate ways for college, which wasn't a problem. We needed to find new friends, gather in different social circles. We needed to grow, we needed to develop and be like other young women our own age who already had so many steps ahead of us. We talked at least 4 or 5 times a week, my sister and I. And it was so amazing to hear how we were both growing and changing. Our parents hated it. They hated the fact that we were finally experiencing the world. Those 4 years of college were so fantastic for me, for my sister as well. We made friends. We got to change our whole outlook on life. We were finally blossoming. We did end up moving to the same city after college because we were working in similar fields. This particular place had the best opportunities. So we got to be together again. We lived about 15 minutes away from each other. We made it a point to get together at least 2 weekends out of the month. We still maintained our friend groups, our social circles, our activities. During this time, we grew more and more distant from our parents. I'm not ashamed to say that it didn't bother me as much as it bothered Charlene. After about 4 years, she decided to move back home to take care of mom and dad because they were both declining in health. I wanted to put them in a home, but she disagreed. I told her I would help financially. I did. Our father passed first, cancer. And then it was just mom and Charlene at the house. And then a couple more years passed and mom died. Through all of this, I still maintained my life. But I also maintained my connection with my sister, supporting her in any way I could, though it was from a distance. I noticed a significant change in her after our parents passed. She had a great shift. She became very withdrawn. I asked her one day when we were having a conversation over the phone if maybe she was regretting her decision. Maybe she felt as though she was missing out on some things. Was she perhaps wishing that she had listened to me and we put our parents in a home? She said no, that watching their decline had a significant effect on her. She said that for two people that believed in God and Jesus so much, for two people who dedicated themselves to church and Bible study, she said they were both so scared to die. It had her questioning so many things about her own beliefs. I tried not to linger in too much conversation about death and other things when we spoke. I tried to encourage her to sell the house, get back to her life, but she didn't. And years passed. I eventually got married. And my sister seemed stuck. By our 46th birthday, she had become a complete recluse. I eventually had to make the decision to take over everything that our parents had left. I had to put the house up for sale. Charlene had turned into a hoarder. House was packed from top to bottom. I had to hire people to come in and clean it out. She would just sit in the recliner and stare into space, rocking back and forth in the chair while the people removed all of the things that had been packed into the house. I asked her if she wanted to come and live with my husband and I. And she would be comfortable, she would have a safe space. I was worried about her. She wasn't well, mentally or physically. That last evening I was with her, she said something very strange. We were talking about her moving to her new apartment. It was in a community designated for people with medical needs, so she wouldn't be by herself. She told me she wouldn't be moving in, that she was going somewhere else, somewhere where I definitely wouldn't have to worry about her, and that she would come and let me know that she was okay. She took me by both of my hands and she said, "Promise me that you are going to live and experience life, enjoy." And I told her I promise. I asked her to explain to me exactly what she was trying to say, and all she did was just shake her head. I didn't want to leave her at the house. I tried to get her to come with me to my hotel, but she said no. She said, "I love you." I said, "I love you back." I drove away feeling like I was never going to see my sister again. I cried myself to sleep that night. Somewhere between the late night and the wee hours of the morning, I could have sworn I heard my sister talking to me, telling me that she was gone, telling me that she would let me know what it was like. But I don't know, I was emotional, exhausted. I woke up the next morning hazy, prepared myself to go to my parents' house for one last time. And when I pulled up in the driveway, I felt that my sister was gone. I let go of the wheel and I just started crying. That connection that I had felt to her all of these years, something that I wasn't always aware of. But now that it wasn't there, I felt its absence. I called 911 before I even put the key in the door. I walked in and there she was, sitting in the same chair that I left her in. head down, eyes closed. I could tell she was stiff. She looked like she was sleeping peacefully. The emergency services came, and of course, there was nothing they could do. I had to find a funeral home to make arrangements. It was just so much. In such a short period of time, I wasn't prepared. But I did what I had to do. I made sure my sister was laid to rest properly. She was interred with our parents. Eventually, I sold the house. And that was it. I was the last remaining member of my immediate family. And even though I had my husband, I felt incredibly alone. I waited for some type of signs from my sister, remembering her words the last time we spoke. I would see butterflies. I would find pennies. I don't know. I was just looking to find something. About a year after she passed, strange phone calls started coming through on both the house phone and my cell phone. One morning, I was making breakfast for my husband and I, and the house phone rang. My hands were dirty, so I had to wash them off, wipe them. By the time I got to the phone, it had stopped ringing. And just as I walked away, it started ringing again. I picked it up and said, "Hello? Hello?" No response. But there was static on the other end that I could hear. And I heard someone trying to say something, but they were very far away. I hung up thinking it's just a bad connection. And then a few minutes later, my cell phone started to ring and the number came up as unknown. And I answered, it was the same thing. I said, "Hello, hello." And that same static and a voice far, far off in the distance, barely audible. I hung up, figuring maybe the cell towers were having issues. I finished making breakfast My husband and I sat down and ate, got into our day, and I completely forgot about those phone calls until I was at work. It was lunchtime. My cell phone rang again, but this time the number showed up as 000. I said, it's definitely a scam call. So I ignored it and sent it to voicemail. And then it started ringing again. Same number showed up. And I sent it to voicemail again. And then the third time, I said, let me just answer this call. And I could hear the static before I put the phone to my ear. I said, hello? Hello? And this time the voice was still far away, but it was clear. Cheryl? And then the line disconnected. And I stayed stuck with the phone to my ear because I knew that voice. My sister. But how? It had to be a prank. Someone was playing a cruel joke on me. But I know the sound of her voice. I'll never forget it as long as I live. I pushed it to the back of my mind, got back into my work, got home, had dinner with my husband, watched a movie, and then got ready for bed. And just as I was drifting off, the house phone rings. And I immediately went back to the thought of my call earlier that day. My husband answered, and he turned and he said, it's nothing but static. And then my cell phone rang. And I knew. Before I even looked at it, I knew that the numbers would be 000. And I picked up and said, Charlene? And there was static. But I heard her voice. Don't get on 717. And then the phone hung up. My husband turned and looked at me and asked who it was. I simply told him it was some strange recording. I tossed and turned most of that night. Don't get on 717. It's definitely my sister. I don't know what the message meant, but she was reaching for me from beyond the veil. I was in a state of shock and disbelief. I just, strange as it sounds, found myself praying for answers, for clarity, for a sign, for anything to let me know that this was really happening. The phone calls stopped for about a week, and I continued to question myself if they were even real. But I know what I heard. One night, I was home by myself reading a book, and the house phone rang. And I was actually hopeful that it was my sister. I answered, and there was silence. But I held on to the receiver. And then eventually I heard the statics come into the line. I said, Charlene, Charlene. And again, that same message. Don't go on 717. And then the call ended. I just clutched the phone, thinking, why do these messages have to be so cryptic? What does it mean? Am I having a psychotic breakdown? Am I missing my sister so much that I am creating some type of illusion to bring myself comfort? Maybe it was a brain tumor. I put the phone down and just shook my head. Maybe I should talk to a psychiatrist. Maybe the grief of losing my parents and then my sister, maybe it's starting to take over and I'm not aware. I decided that I would talk to a therapist. I'm not sure I was going to tell her about the phone calls, but I felt I needed some help. The next day, I made an appointment with a therapist. And I was fully prepared to I don't know, unload all of my trauma, my grief, maybe figure out how it was even possible for me to manifest a call from my sister. It sounded crazy. I started my sessions, and honestly, it helped. I didn't get a call for months. So I said, well, I was definitely the one creating this illusion. But I never could explain why such a strange message. Almost an entire year passed. Another year further away from my sister's passing. One early morning, my cell phone rings. I didn't turn around right away to answer it because I was coming out of a very heavy sleep. It rang for a second time and I started stirring, but I still wasn't in a rush to answer. But by the third time, I was able to reach for the phone, and those numbers 000 showed up. And I thought to myself, there's no way. I just held the phone and watched it ring until it stopped. And then immediately it started ringing again. My husband started stirring and said, honey, please answer it. It might be an emergency. I decided to put it on speakerphone because I had to know if he could hear it too. And I answered, put it on speakerphone, and there it was, the static. My sister, a little clearer this time, more urgent. Don't go on 717. Don't go on 717. Don't go on 717. And then the line went dead. And I asked my husband, I said, did you hear that? Did you hear that voice? He said, honey, all I heard was static. He said the cell towers are probably having trouble. And he went back to sleep. But I sat up bewildered once again because the therapy had been working, right? I was feeling better. I wasn't hallucinating or having any delusions. But my husband heard the static, even though he didn't hear the voice. He heard the static because he said he heard the static phone call was real. I put the phone back down and just took a deep breath, laid back in bed, and tried my best to convince myself that what just happened wasn't real, that it is all a part of my grief, and I'm still dealing with it, and grief takes time. I went through the next few days of my life sort of in a daze, but believing that I still had more grief to work through. I was so preoccupied, I didn't even realize that my anniversary was coming up. And my wonderful husband told me he had a surprise planned. Finally, something to take my mind off of grief, off of the phone calls. He told me, pack light, something quick. We were going to go away for a few days, but he wouldn't tell me where. So later that evening, we made our way to the airport, and I was giddy and excited. Strange phone calls, grief, sadness, nowhere near my mind. We made it to the terminal, and I couldn't wait anymore. I needed to know where we were going. And he showed me the boarding pass. And I didn't see where we were going because the number 717 jumped right out at me. And I heard my sister's voice in my head, my dead sister's voice in my head telling me, don't go on 717. And I grabbed my husband's hand and I said, honey, we can't go. He asked why. I said, I can't explain why. I can, but it won't make any sense. But just please know that we can't go on this trip right now. Please. And I started shaking and started feeling lightheaded. And I broke out in a sweat. And I had to sit down. And my husband immediately said, okay, you don't look well. Let's go to the hospital. So instead of getting on our flight, we ended up sitting in the emergency room. He wouldn't take me home until I got checked out, even though I assured him I was fine. And while we were sitting waiting for me to be seen, news flashed across the screen that Flight 717 crashed. I stared at the TV in disbelief. My husband turned to me and asked me, how did I know? How did I know to not get on that flight? I looked at him, put my hand on his cheek, and I said, a sister's love never dies. Charlene told me. And I left it at that. He didn't ask for any further explanation. He just took my hand, kissed the back of it, and we continued to wait for me to be seen while we listened to the news talk about how everyone on board the flight had perished. Well, messages from beyond the veil can certainly save our lives. This has been season 2, episode 8 of Paranorleans with your hostess, Fat Girl Freestyle. Please make sure you are following on all social platforms, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, Fat Girl Freestyle channel, where I have a lot more content posted. Please make sure you are sharing these episodes with your family, friends, loved ones, co-workers, even strangers that you come across. If you're feeling generous and would like to support my content, of course, Venmo at Fat Girl Freestyle, PayPal at fatgirlfreestyle@gmail.com. If you would like to contact me, or if you have a story of your own that you would like to share, fatgirlfreestyle@gmail.com. This has been another episode of Paranorleans, the Paranormal New Orleans podcast, where we tell stories of the strange, the spooky, scary, paranormal, and unexplained from across the New Orleans area, Louisiana, and beyond. Once again, I'm your hostess, Fat Girl Freestyle. Thank you for being here with me. I appreciate you for listening. And as always, I'll see you next time.